The first thing the Mishnah stated, that in order to be Eidim Zomimim, you need to go ahead and talk about the witnesses. You have to say about the witnesses that the witnesses were with us. You don't talk about the actual details of the case. Right? That's what the Gemara said. Now, so the Gemara wants to know, where do we see this phenomenon that the idea of Eidim Zomimim, that the second pair of witnesses are believed, is specifically when they're talking about the first pair of witnesses, that the credibility, meaning in the sense that the witnesses weren't there. They were somewhere else. Not that the second pair of witnesses come to the court and they contradict the first pair of witnesses. Testimony. We said if the second pair of witnesses contradict the first pair of witnesses' testimony, then it's 2 against 2. And we don't believe one pair more than the other pair. When the second pair of witnesses goes ahead and they say about the first pair of witnesses that you guys were with us, so then we say we believe the second pair. Right? That's the case I believes it. So the Gemara opens up, Minahani Mile. Where do we know that you have to talk about the witnesses themselves? That is the Gemara's question. Dr. Navid, you have the Gemara's question? How do you know that the case of Eidim Zomimim is only when the second pair talks about the first pair regarding saying that you guys are with us. You weren't there. You were removed from the story. How do we know that they're talking about that and not talking about the details of the case? So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Ada, the Amar Kra. The pasuk says regarding Eidim Zomimim. Morning, Nathan. The pasuk says, "Hine eid sheker, ha'eid sheker ana ba'achiv." The pasuk says that he's a witness that's a false witness. He's a false witness that testified against his brethren. Right? He's a false witness that testified against his brethren. It's the aid. We don't say ha'edu sheker. It doesn't say in the pasuk that he's an edu sheker. The testimony is false. What does the pasuk say about this eid sheker? Ha'eid sheker. The witness is false. The witness is something about the witness that he has no right to be there to make the testimony because he was somewhere else. Ad shetishaker gufa shel edus. You have to go ahead and the second pair of witnesses have to talk about and make false and discredit the gufa shel edus, the edim, the witnesses themselves. The Rabbi Yishmael Pana, what did he say? Let's look at the language, the Gemara. We're going to see the Gemara. Mina hane mile. How do we know this statement of the Mishnah that you have to go against the witnesses themselves? Mina means how do we know? Like from where hane mile these words come from? Where is the source from this law? Rav Ada says the Amakra, when the pasuk says, when it describes the story of the Zomim, v'hine eid sheker. There was a false witness, but it doesn't mean eid sheker. It doesn't mean one witness. It means both witnesses were false. Ha'eid sheker ana b'achiv. He has testified a false testimony. Eid sheker, false testimony, right? A false testimony. Eid sheker ana b'achiv. He testified against his brother. But the pasuk emphasized the aid. It doesn't say the edus, the testimony. It focuses on the person, the witnesses. There's two things. There's the witness, and there's the testimony of the witness. The pasuk emphasizes that the witness was false, and emphasized that the witness had no right to be there at the place. He could not have testified. He could not have seen the incident because he was somewhere else. The Rabbi Yishmael Tana, the yeshiva Rabbi Yishmael, they have a brighter with a different source for this law. Nathan, you hear the question? The question is, we said that in order for a group of witnesses to be considered framers, that you throw them out and you punish them and you do to them what they want to the other guy, is only if the second peer says about the first peer that you guys had you weren't there. You weren't there, you were with us, you were somewhere else. When the second peer says that, that's the case the Torah believes the second peer. But if they contradict the statements of the witnesses, when they talk about the details of the case, then we don't say. I mean, if let's say two guys say Reuven, Shimon killed Shimon. The first two guys said Reuven killed Shimon on Sundays, and the second pair of witnesses says no, it wasn't Reuven that killed Shimon on Sunday. Someone else killed Shimon on Sunday. So we have two witnesses saying A, and two witnesses saying B. Two witnesses say Reuven borrowed $20 from Shimon on Sunday, and two witnesses no, Reuven did not borrow $20. So you have two witnesses saying one thing, two witnesses contradicting. Those are witnesses that contradict each other. We're discussing, because we're arguing about the details of the case. When you argue about the details of the case, the second pair is not believed more than the first pair. They're just two guys say this, and two guys say that. Does that make sense? Two guys say Nathan borrowed $100, two guys say he didn't borrow $100. So who's right? So who's right? So what do we say? 2 against 2. Two guys say that the husband gave a get to his wife that day. Two guys say the husband not give a get. Two guys say the husband got married. Two guys say he didn't get married. He married. Two guys say he didn't get married. So if 2 witnesses against 2 witnesses. Right, but we say there's 2 against 2. But that's because the two guys are arguing about the details of the case. But when the second pair of witnesses don't talk about the case, they don't know whether it happened or didn't happen, whether he borrowed the money, whether he gave his wife a gift, whether he got married to the woman. They don't say anything. I'm talking about the details of the case. You know what they're coming to say? You guys, the first pair of witnesses, you were with us on that day. You have no ability to say testimony. You testified that this guy gave his wife a get on that day. You guys were with us the whole day. You were with us. So now we're going to believe the second pair of witnesses. That's what the case of the Torah is. That's the case of the Torah say you believe the second pair of witnesses. What's the reason? Because the same way if the second pair of witnesses say about the first pair, this pair of witnesses are Rishonim. We know that this pair of witnesses, they were in McDonald's, they ate cheeseburgers, they don't keep Shabbat. If the first pair, the second pair says about the first pair, you have two witnesses come to court, and they testify that Reuven killed Shimon, and then you have another pair want to say they come to the court and say you can't trust their testimony. The Torah says you can't have people who violate the Torah, who have no interest in the Torah, who intentionally violate certain things in the Torah. You can't. They're not kosher words. They're invalid. They're Rishonim. He willingly, he knows about Shabbat, doesn't keep Shabbat. So if the second pair want to say the first one is Rishonim, do we believe the second pair when it says yes? Because why? Because they're talking because they're coming to testify about the credibility of the witnesses. You see, the witnesses are Rishonim. They're talking about can the witnesses testify or not. So, and also, if now could the witnesses say no, we're not Rishonim. We didn't go to McDonald's. You can't say we're not going to McDonald's because you're talking about yourselves. If I testify against you, you can't go ahead and you're not going to say I'm not a Rasha. Two witnesses come. If 2 guys come and say the first 2 witnesses are Rishonim, or because they say no, we're not Rishonim. You're accused of being a Rasha. Now it's not a question. We're talking about who you are, and therefore you can't believe to say no, I'm not a Rasha. We're not Rishonim, right? It's not that you don't have the power because you don't have that. If 2 people are accusing you of something, you cannot say you're talking about and you want to talk about yourself, and you come to defend yourself. You have the ability as a witness to defend someone else. You can testify about somebody else. You can't testify about yourself. Correct? So too, the same way if the second pair of witnesses would say that the first pair of witnesses were Sha'im, they were in McDonald's the whole day. And the first pair of witnesses would not be believed to say, no, we were not in McDonald's. So too, if the second pair of witnesses say that the first pair of witnesses, you guys were with us in some other part of the world at that day. So that's the case. The Torah says you believe the second pair of witnesses, because they're saying that the first pair of witnesses have no ability to make a testimony because they were somewhere else in the world. Which witnesses were no good? First pair, second pair, both pairs are no good.
Or whatever said, like, okay, they're no good, but call so and so, they also.
As long as they bring the witnesses down and the witness in the court checks the witness, I would think as long as the court checks the witness's testimony and it comes out that the witness testimony were in line with each other. I mean, maybe there are details we have to look at, but I think, but that would be, so that's the chidush of Eidim Domim. But the question would be, you have to ask the question, why is the second pair of witnesses believed over the first pair?
Because they were with them.
Because they were with them. Because we're talking about you guys.
Yeah, they were with them.
I'm not talking about the testimony. I'm not arguing the details of the case. You know what? It could be you're right. It could be Reuven killed Shimon. It could,
You have to be physically with them.
I mean, right. You have to be in a way that we could say that for sure you weren't there at that time. So, what? Then you know that then that's the case. The Torah says these guys are framers. That's the case. The Torah says that we throw the book and we punish those first pair of witnesses and we do to them what they wanted to the other guy because they said a testimony that they were totally removed from. Even if it's true what they testified about, but they had no right to say it because they weren't there. I gave the case. What could be the case the Torah might be talking about? Someone borrowed $100 from Nathan, but Nathan forgot to have witnesses on the deal, no documentation. You're supposed to have a documentation, some witnesses. You didn't have any of that. So you tell your good friends, guys, the guy borrowed $100 from me. I want you to go testify, he borrowed $100. And it's true. They borrowed $100 from me. Nathan wouldn't say a lie. They borrowed $100. And his friends want to do Nathan a favor. Because the only way Nathan's going to get the money back, because the guy is a scoundrel. He's denying it. He's saying that it's not true. He's a liar. But he has no way to get no recourse. Because if the guy's lying, you have no documentation. What do you do? So Nathan tells two good friends, and they say, oh, come on, guys, this is what happened. I have no, to come to court and testify against the guy. But the problem with that is, even if it's true, but these two guys, since they did not witness it, they have no ability to make that testimony. So, and therefore, if those two guys come forward and say the testimony, and another two guys come and say, guys, you guys were with us on that day. Nathan's friends forgot that these other two guys, no, they were with them in that day. It happened in New York. The supposed loan happened in New York, and these guys were in Chicago on that day. And they forgot that they were out of town that day. Two guys come to you guys with us. So now we're gonna say we can do to the two guys what they wanted to Nathan, even though what is the other guy who Nathan supposedly borrowed the money from? Either borrowed the money from Nathan, those two guys, because they had no right to say the testimony. You didn't belong here. You can't say the testimony, even if it's true. Yes, Dr. Navid, you want to say that? Okay.
What about you say the Nathan told the friends, but it depends when Nathan told them. Maybe 2 days after he told them, because it's like in a court of law, it depends when you told the person. If Nathan just told the friends the day of the case, that's different.
No, but before. But we don't accept testimony from a word of someone's mouth. You have to see it yourself. Nathan can tell them anything he wants, even though it's truth. But Nathan tells somebody something. If they did not see it, they did not witness it, they have no right to testify. So the Gemara says, that's the first from the word of Ha'ed Sheker, but that's the first opinion of the Gemara. That teaches us you have to go against the witness. And the Rabbi Yishmael Tana, the Brisa, the Yeshiva Rabbi Yishmael, they learned from a different word of the pasuk. When the pasuk describes Eidim Zomimim, the pasuk says, Ki yakum Eid Chamas, when witnesses come, la'anot bo sarah. to testify something that they were removed from. La'anot is to testify both against him, against the witnesses, Sarah. They testified against the witnesses that these witnesses were removed from here. They had no weight, they weren't here. They were somewhere else. That's how the Ritva learns the Gemara understanding. La'anot bo, they testified against the witnesses, Sarah, that they were not here. Asheti Sarah, gufa shel edut. You need to remove the witnesses from the scene. You talk about the witnesses. La'anot bo. That's the case that you do to the witnesses what they wanted to do to the other ones, because you're talking about the witnesses themselves. You're not talking about the edut. You're not talking about what they said. It has nothing to do with what they said. It's all about were the witnesses here at the time or not here at the time. That's the question. And if we have second pair of witnesses say that these witnesses were not here at the time, if they claim that this event happened, that's the case. The Torah says we do to those witnesses what they wanted to do to the other guy.
The only part I don't understand is the Torah says you believe the second witness.
Second pair.
But out of like 5 witnesses, last time you said against the third witness, against the fourth witness. Oh,
Right. So what?
You have like 5 witnesses come, then you should have 4 items.
Very good. Excellent point, Dr. Nivet. If more witnesses come, after the second pair of witnesses come, the second pair of witnesses says the first pair were with us, correct? What did the second pair of witnesses say? The first pair of witnesses with us on the date that supposedly it happened, correct? Then what happened? 5 more witnesses come. And what did the next 5 witnesses say? They say they agreed with the first pair of witnesses. With the first pair of witnesses, what did they have? First pair of witnesses say Reuven borrowed $100 from Shimon on Sunday in New York. Second pair of witnesses.
The topic doesn't matter.
The topic doesn't matter. Meaning to say, what we're going to have this phenomenon we're going to see. If let's say,
He said New York, the second one says no, it was LA. The third one says New York.
wait a second. The second pair of witnesses say what was in LA? The witnesses or the event of the law?
You know the witnesses.
The witnesses were in there. Now therefore, at that point, the second pair of witnesses made the first pair of witnesses framed.
Correct.
Comes the third pair of witnesses. What do they say?
They say it's not true. The second witnesses.
They say about the first pair of witnesses.
No, they talk about the second pair of witnesses.
Oh, they say the second pair of witnesses were where?
No. The third pair, the new pair that just came in, is going to say that that's not possible. You were with us in New York.
The second pair of witnesses, well, they say about who? Who was the third pair of witnesses?
The first witness
Said that one.
I don't want to be so complicated. The first witness says
Yes.
this guy owes him money. Okay, he was in New York.
Reuven borrowed from Shimon in New York.
Yeah,
Good.
the second pair comes and makes this items on it. He says, no, you were with us.
The witnesses was in Miami.
Okay. Third pair comes and says, how can that be? You were with us.
Who's the you? Translate, who's the you?
The second pair witness.
Okay. The third pair says about the second,
Exactly.
that the second pair of witnesses were with us.
In New York or in Hong Kong. How could you say you are there?
Right. So it would seem in that case, so now the third pair of witnesses made the second pair of witnesses over them.
Correct.
So in
So
that
then
case,
this one should be from them.
right. So once we made this, now when that we made the second pair of witnesses over them, so now we have the second pair of witnesses have become framers. So now your question is, now that we believe the third pair of witnesses over the second,
Correct.
now should we throw out the testimony of the second pair of witnesses, what they said about the first pair of witnesses? Right, that should be logical that we can throw it out, correct? Because now that the only the second pair of witnesses, as long as no one disproves them.
Oh, okay.
But because in that case of the Mishnah, what was the case of the Mishnah? The case of the Mishnah was the following. Reuven said, 2 witnesses said Reuven killed Shimon on Sunday in New York. Second pair of witnesses say, how could you say Reuven killed Shimon in New York? You was us in China on that day. So we believe that the second pair of witnesses said that the first pair were framers, will kill the first pair of witnesses, based on the testimony of the second pair of witnesses. Is that correct? Because they say the first pair were framed, they framed the guy. They say, you guys were with us, another part of the world on that day. Comes the third pair of witnesses and say exactly what the first pair said. Reuven killed Shimon on that date in New York. Exactly what the first pair of witnesses said. The second pair of witnesses who said about the first pair that you guys were with us in China on that day, they say also that the third pair of witnesses that came were also with us in China on that day. So again, so the second pair are not arguing on the details of the case. They're saying about the third pair, they were not here. They were with us. The same way they said about the first pair, that the first pair was us, they say about the third pair was us. And therefore, we're going to believe again the second pair. Because the second pair is not talking about the details of the case. They're discussing the credibility of the witnesses. And they're coming to say that the witnesses were removed from the scene, but they were with us in China on that day.
So the second pair of witnesses is always a strong set.
They're only strong because they're not talking about the details of the
So
case.
if he was my friend, okay,
Right.
what we would do,
Which he is.
yeah, I would have, hey, I would send my friend as a secretary because their testimony.
You're gonna knock out everybody who wants to testify against you. You're gonna send it exactly. That could be. That means that you're getting. But Jewish people generally are not. Not everyone's going to be willing to testify falsely, and it could be he'll be caught also. Like you said, he could be caught by saying to other people, saying that Nathan and his friend was with us on that day. That they're saying that they saw the other thing. The day that they say this people with them, they were with us.
When does it choose?
When there's
Let's
a
say that the court judges testimony over God. A month later, someone comes and says, I was with Nathan.
right. So we see when when the death penalty actually was given, not just the verdict. When there's a verdict, the court is still open to change the verdict. So we say even there is a verdict, but before the verdict was executed, the fact there's time, a lot of time, sometimes there's time between the verdict of the court to the actual execution of the court, of the verdict, right? So if from the verdict, and that is the time, by the way, they become the Zomamim. But the classic case of Zomamim, is in order to punish the witnesses for what they attempted to do, there had to have been a verdict. Just to come to court and there's no verdict yet, we will not punish them. God will deal with them. We punish them when there was a verdict. And in certain circumstances, the only time we will punish the witnesses when there was a verdict and the verdict was not meted out yet, was not executed yet. But once the verdict was executed, we will close our hands and not do anything. We won't, meaning, what's the case? The case is, if the two witnesses come and say, Reuven killed Shimon, and based on their testimony, the court gave a verdict, and not only did the court give a verdict, they actually implemented the verdict. And now two of the witnesses come and say, you know what? Those guys that you based your verdict on were with us. We're not going to kill those first pair of witnesses. We're not going to kill the first pair of witnesses that would seem like framed the guy after already happened, after the verdict was already implemented. Let's get the case. You hear the case? This idea that the Torah says we do to the witnesses, right, Morris? What they wanted to do to the other guy in the case of death, because many say in the case of monetary, you will, even if the money was done, will still punish the witnesses what they wanted to do to the other guy. But when it comes to death penalty, once the person was killed based on the testimony of witnesses, we're not going to, and then second pair of witnesses come and say about the first pair, you guys are with us. Once the death penalty was executed, we will not kill the framers. And we're gonna see that the Saddukim, the people who did not follow tradition, they did not. What? So if
Not the witness.
not the witness, if the defendant, if the original defendant got executed based on the testimony of the first pair of witnesses, we will not kill the first pair of witnesses. We for framing the guy. You only will kill.
You should kill the judges for making the back.
But okay, they're okay. They would have to do a lot of. I mean, obviously they tried their best. You have 23 judges, minimum of 23 judges for such a court case. So it's very rare that they're going to make such a mistake. And also, the greater the court, Hashem will protect them. It says God's there in the court and hopefully protect them that they won't make a wrong decision. And remember, how often did the court ever execute somebody? It was very rare. It was very rare for the court to kill somebody. So remember, it's also one of the 10 commandments to bear false witness. So it's a big deal. Testimony is not a small thing. So that's the case that we're going to go ahead and kill the framers when they framed somebody and the guy was not killed, but there was a court verdict. You got it?
It was a verdict.
The verdict, but not yet executed yet.
But not executed. What if it's executed?
Then the
We
court.
won't go after the
We won't go after it. God's good morning. How are you? Good to see you. Very cute.
So the reason why we don't kill them is because we believe them. How could they be framers if you executed them, right?
But so even though but if two witnesses say that they were framers, so what? So
It's too late. The case is closed. We kill
it doesn't seem like we closed the case, because it could be that we just closed the case in the aspect that we don't kill the first pair of witnesses. But it would seem to me that they have a right to invalidate those witnesses from being ever witnesses again. Right? So there's a purpose of keeping the court open to find out, to say that if you could prove that this pair of witnesses were framers. So that in itself is a worthwhile purpose. So now the Gemara continues. Amar Rava, we're in the third wide line. Amar Rava and Hey Amar Aleph. In the English, it's on the right side of 582. Amar Rava. Bo Shnayim. Two people came, v'amru, and they said, b'mizrach bira, on the eastern side of the palace. By the way, did you talk about anybody do Kiddush Levana yet? If you didn't do Kiddush Levana, it's been a very rainy month. Got to keep your eyes open for the moon. All right. We did it last night. What? Yeah, trees also, right. We got the Levana last night. It was coming at the what? Oh, you got it? Oh, they got it. Very good. Amar Rava. Bo Shnayim. Two witnesses come. V'amru, and they say the Mizrach Bira, on the eastern side of the palace, Mizrach, the east, the Bira of the palace. Harak Ploni. So-and-so, Ploni is like in way to so-and-so. Harak Ploni, so-and-so killed Esanefesh. So-and-so killed this person on the eastern side. Where did it happen? You call 911. Where is it? Where did it happen? It happened in the east side of the palace. Ubo Shnayim. And then two people came. V'amru. And they said, V'halo b'marav bira. On the western side, imanu hayitem. You with us on the western side. You with us on the western side. You say it took place on the east side of the palace? The murder took place on the east side of the palace? You guys were with us on the west side of the palace on that day. So now what would you say question is, can you see from the west side of the palace to the east side of the palace You said that you saw this now. The vision from the west side to the east side. So is it possible for you, if you're able to see from the west side to the east side, so then the testimony of the witnesses would be good. It's not contradictory. The fact that they were on the west side and they say it happened on the east side, but if you could see from the west to the east, now there's no contradiction.
Where are you deriving that they saw it was being with them?
Because let's look at the language of the Gemara. The first witnesses said it happened on the east side. They didn't say where they were. They just said the Mizrach Bira, on the east side of the palace, Harak Plonius and Nefesh. The crime took place on the east side. They didn't say that they were where they were. You see that, doctor? The witnesses only spoke about the occurrence of the crime. Where did the crime take place? We have witnesses that come and say about the first pair of witnesses that they were on the west side. They say that the witnesses, west side, and the first set of witnesses said that the crime took place on the east side. They're not saying the crime. They're not arguing on the details of crime on the east. They're only talking about the witnesses, where the witnesses were. The second pair, when they're trying to tell us about are the witnesses credible witnesses or not, were they with us or not? They said they were with us on the west side. Now, is it possible now? So the Gemara is going to say, if you could see from the west to the east, you'll be able to see it. So everything remains. The second pair of witnesses, we believe, said that the witnesses were on the west side. But we believe the first pair of witnesses because they're able to see from the west side to the east side. There's nothing. Everything is transparent. If that's the word, everything is fluid. There's nothing. We don't see any red flag here. You can see it's true they were on the west side, but they can see from the west side to the east side. So the Gemara says, Chazinan, we see, when you're standing b'ma'arav in the west, ma'arav bira, in the west of the palace, merzi chazula mizrach bira, merzi chazul means you can see the east side of the palace. Ein elu zomimim. These are not framers. They're not we don't see they're framing anybody because they could see from the west to the east. And they say the crime took place on the east, the first pair of witnesses said. Vimlav, but if you cannot see from the west to the east, and they say, the first pair of witnesses say that the crime took place on the east side, and we have a second pair of witnesses say that these guys, the witnesses were on the west side, and you're not in distance from the west side to the east side, it's too far to see, then how do you lose them? Then they are framers. Because you guys say you saw this crime took place on the east side, you weren't there. You are on the west side, and that west side of the palace, you can't see the east side.
But it doesn't mean they were together. It's just not there. So it goes against the mission.
Explain, what do you mean women? Who wasn't together? No, the second set of witnesses say, but the first, good morning, Mr. Feldman. The second pair of witnesses say about the first pair of witnesses that you guys were with us on the west side. You were with us on the west side of the palace. That's what the second pair of witnesses are saying about the first pair of witnesses. So therefore, they are saying that the first pair of witnesses were totally removed from the scene and has no right to testify, and they're framers. That's what the Gemara says. So the Gemara says, Pshita. The Gemara says it's obvious. Mr. Feldman, just to bring you up to date, we have two witnesses come to court and say Reuven killed Shimon on the east side of the palace. Two other witnesses come to court, subsequently and say that you guys, you say it happened on the east, you say that Reuven killed Shimon on the east side of the palace, you with us on the west side of the palace, on that day and that time. So what do we do? we see, can you see from the west side to the east side? So even if it's true that they were with them on the west side of the palace on that day, but if you could see from the west side to the east side, and the first bear witness said it happened on the east side. So if you can see from the west side to the east side, so they're not lying, no one's lying. But if you can't see from the west side to the east side of the palace, and the first bear witness said that it happened on the east side, then we consider the first bear witness frameless. So the Gemara says Shita. Shita means what? It's obvious, for sure. You ever hear it for sure? Right? It's obvious. What's the chidush? So the Gemara says the following: Ma'o detema. You might have said, Ma'o detema. You might have said, Lechush, we should be concerned. Linahora. Nahora is light, right? Linahora bari, healthy, very good vision. Maybe the first pair of witnesses had this amazing vision, great vision, that even though the average person cannot see from the west side of this palace to the east side of the palace, but maybe these witnesses had such great vision that you could go ahead and see from the west side to the east side. So therefore the Gemara says, and that Kamash Malan, the Chiddush is, if the average person doesn't see that, we're not going to believe, we're not going to say that the witnesses saw from the west side to the east side, if the average guy can't see that. And since the second pair of witnesses say about the first pair of witnesses that you guys were with us on the west side, we're going to consider the first pair of witnesses framers, and we're going to kill the first pair of witnesses. There's a sheet in the Tosfos chance. Why not? Because maybe you should be concerned he has great vision. Is that what you bother? So it was an amazing vision that has a possibility. Meaning, we're not talking about a vision. We're not talking about a vision that's impossible, right? The language of the Gemara is maybe he had some amazing vision. So the Tosfos Shan says what the doctor says. He learns the Gemara. You have to be concerned to both sides of the coin. Number one, you have to be concerned that maybe they're lying, because the average guy cannot see from the west side of this palace to the east side. And if they can't see from the west side to the east side, you can't kill the guy that they testified against. They say Reuven killed Shimon, and they say it happened on the east side. The average guy can't see from the west side to the east side. We're not going to kill Reuven, right? Because we don't have any real testimony. Because most people can't see from the west side to the east side. They claim to have on the east side. Therefore, you can't kill Reuven based on the testimony. But you also can't kill the witnesses. You hear what Tosfos Shah said? Because we're afraid maybe they do have great vision. Maybe they have some vision that they're able to see greater than most people. So therefore, exactly. So therefore, we're not gonna kill the first guy, the apparent murderer, and we're not gonna kill the apparent framers, because since it's a possibility with someone with exceptional, outstanding, unusual vision would be able to see it. If we could ascertain that there's such a possibility, we're not going to say they actually framed it. That's the opinion of the Tosfos. Say it again? No, you have to see it. Yeah,
I heard it, he was there.
To my knowledge, you have to see it. It has to be seen. Okay, well, have a great day, everybody. Look forward to seeing everyone tomorrow. Hopefully, we'll have more people even. To encourage others to keep on coming back. You know how things happen. You know how things grow. By people encouraging, right? A word. What did you say, Mr. Feldman?
Word and it grows.
Exactly. But if you leave it by itself, nothing happens by itself. Exactly. No, we have to be proactive. Remember, you're offering them olam haba, olam hazeh. You're giving them Torah. You're giving them bracha. Right, doctor? You know, some people like to give stock tips. This is the best tip. To learn Torah, it's the greatest tip. Yeah, stock tips sometimes win, and sometimes lose. This is always the winner. How do you like that, David? Well, you like that? Okay,
Sorry about that.
thank you. Nathan, Morris.
Unplug it, or what? Yeah.
I'll take care of it. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah, it's so sweet. See that?